Okay, good morning, everybody. We are going to get started. Miss Gunter is going to be joining us in just a minute. She's dealing with something right now, and so she was just texting me, and she's going to be coming on in just a minute. So we can go ahead, though, and get started to respect all of your time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I really appreciate all of you guys joining us and being part of this conversation today. Today we're going to be talking about raising an independent teenager. And in my email message about this being our topic, I think I joked that this is something that I need to definitely take my own advice on. I think we find ourselves just doing stuff for our kids, that maybe we should be asking them to do for themselves, because sometimes it's just easier. Yesterday I was in a Zoom actually with Ms. Gunter and with a whole bunch of other people in the district, but I was texting her because I was working from home yesterday. We hear Ms. Gunter is here. I'm letting her in. I was working from home yesterday. Welcome, Yvonne. I was just about to tell them the story about what I was texting you yesterday. So I was working from home yesterday, and we were on this big Zoom call with like 200 people across the district. And my son had come in and, Mom, can I have a soda? And I was like, I'm working. I'm in the middle of the Zoom. You got to get yourself. And I was texting Yvonne, like, I'm raising an independent teenager because I made him get his own soda. But, this is something that, like, on the surface level, that yes, of course we want to raise independent teenagers, and we want them to be able to go out on their own and like live their own lives and not being relying on us to do everything when they're in 30s, right? That's our goal, at least. And that, though, is a lot easier said than done. Is sometimes it's just easier for them. So Yvonne, what do you have to say about this topic?
Oh, I got a lot to say about this topic. It is such a struggle. And sorry I'm late. Crisis knows no time schedules. So one of the things I like to start this topic with is why the way that we parent matters. And my husband and I have been together for 24 years now. And our personalities were are kind of, oh, sorry. Oh, wait.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh my gosh, I just lost it. Okay. The way that my husband and I were raised is very, very different. So back to like the 80s, both of our families grew up relatively poor, maybe middle class. Our parents had financial struggles. When David, who's my husband, was 16, his parents forced him to get a job to help out with everything. If he wanted to go to prom or do his senior pictures, he had to pay for it. He paid for college, he paid for his first car. He paid for my engagement ring when he was making $5 an hour working at Fresh Choice, which is like Sweet Tomato, if you remember. And he really learned the value of a dollar. And I remember thinking, like, gosh, your parents are mean. They don't give you anything. They make you work. And, he really understands that concept of like delayed gratification. And he knew when he was young, like, hey, I want different than the way my parents lived, and I'm going to work my butt off for it. He saves money. Our retirement plan is very detailed, like down to the month that I can live before I'm broke, like literally like to detail. And that's the way that he was raised. On the flip side, my dad handed me a 20 whenever I needed it. Whether that meant he was going to go bankrupt or not, he made sure that I had those things. He paid for my car, they paid for prom, they paid for senior pictures. I didn't have to work. I decided to work when I was like 20. I worked at Red Robin and I would literally leave my shift with my tips in my pocket. In the Red Robin at Eastridge, if you know, is inside of the mall. So I would literally go into the mall with my paycheck and spend it all. And that's just how I did it. Like everything was like, I need it in the moment and I need things now and I don't really plan for the future. And it took me longer to just figure things out, like what I wanted to do. I didn't go to college till I was in my 30s. When I decided to become a social worker, never ever did I think, I want to be a social worker. Like, I wonder how much money they make. It didn't matter. Like, that's just what I wanted to do. So that was never like a way that I was raised of like really like planning things. I just kind of do things, right? And that obviously in life that doesn't work out. And so there's been a lot of tension between my husband and I of like how we raise our kids. He's like, dude, stop spoiling and they're going to turn into you financially. And I'm like, don't say that, you know, because the reality is if I wasn't married, I would probably live with my mom. Like that's where we are. So we've kind of had this like, how do we find some balance, right? I mean, I want my kids to have more than I had and I want them to have opportunity, but how do I raise them to be independent? And it's interesting because every year we do this, it's like my kid's getting closer to moving out. And the thought of him being on his own is absolutely terrifying. And so every year I go through this list of like, okay, I'm going to make a list of things in the last week that I did for my kid that I probably should not have. I should have let him do on his own. And so I made my list this morning and I was kind of laughing of like, oh my gosh. So yesterday, my son will be 18 in 2 months. I went into his room 5 times to yell at him to get up, totally forgetting it was Wednesday. And I made him get out of, I yelled at him to get out of bed, told him to take a shower, brush his teeth. We went to Starbucks and he didn't want to order because he's shy. So I ordered for him. I bring him snacks in his room when he's at school because, that's what moms do, right? I did apply for a job for him at Target. I went online and like filled it out, which is like the worst thing a mom could do, right? Like how embarrassing. And I cleaned his bathroom because he left clothes everywhere. I put his clothes in the dryer because he fell asleep before they were done. And then last week I paid him $10 to clean my car out. I went out there. It didn't even look like it happened. And yet I still paid him. That's just like how I have been, treating him. And it's like, what a disservice. And so this next part, I want you to answer honestly. And obviously you don't have to answer honestly to the rest of us, but I want you to really be honest with yourself. And so I'm going to give you a list of things. And so if you want to grab a pen and just like mark down how many of these things you do for your own children. Remember, this is a safe space. There is no judgment. So if you answer yes to these, it's okay. Like it's a learning process. And, some of our kids are older than others. And so I'm going to read off some things and you just mark down for yourself. And if you want to share, awesome. But if not, don't. Do you do your kids' laundry? I'm going to write these down too. Do your kids fix their own snacks? Or do they come looking for soda? Or do you bring them? Like if they're hungry, can they figure it out? Do they wake themselves up? If you were gone and they had to prepare their own dinner, could they? Do you leave them home alone? That wasn't on there, but is that something that you've done, is left them home alone? Do they clean their own rooms? Do you clean their rooms? Do the rooms get cleaned? After dinner, does everybody wash their own dish? Do you wash all the dishes? I know for me, I stand at the sink and I complain about it, but then I didn't make anybody do it. So how about packing for a trip? I remember when my kids were little, I would always have to get the 3 backpacks out and do that. Do you still pack for them? Or if they pack for themselves, are you there micromanaging, reminding them of everything they need? Do your kids put themselves to bed? Or do you have to yell at them to go to bed or tell them or remind them? Or like, do they just go to bed on their own? Now this one's a hard one. Managing their grades. Is it something where you're on school loop all the time, reminding them about assignments that are due, or do you think that they're able to manage their own school and their own grades? This one we haven't had to deal with this year. I always had my kid forgot his book or his lunch or something like that, and I would go to school and drop it off for him. Is that something that you've done in the past? Where you go down to the school and drop off their book or their lunch or something else that they maybe forgot? The next one is calling or emailing teachers to address a problem, which is fine. I think that's great. But have you done that before giving them the opportunity to settle it for themselves? It's okay to step in when necessary, but have you given them the opportunity to do that? Navigate nearby areas. This is a tough one for me. I'm kind of more of like a safety worrier. So the thought of my kids taking the bus or being out on their own kind of freaks me out. The other day, my husband dropped my son off down the hill at the haircut place and then came home and I'm like, well, where is he? And he said, oh, I told him to walk home. And I'm like, my heart is racing. And he's like, dude, you know, he's 17, right? And I'm like, okay. But I was like waiting by the door, checking the cameras, like, is he home yet? Do you let your kids venture out? Do they navigate to nearby areas? Of course, it's different this year. Maybe they're not going out so much, but is that something that you would be open to doing? So again, not meant to judge, but this is just like to have an awareness of like, okay, how much of the things that I'm doing for my kiddos are things that maybe they could try to do for themselves. How'd you do on this one, Ginny?
It was interesting, you know, and we've done this before in the past, so I've heard these before. I was really struck this particular time, more so than I have been in the past, with the age difference between my kids.
Okay.
My 17, my son is 11. And so for a lot of these, I found myself, well, I don't do that for Hannah, or yeah, Hannah's allowed to do that, or, you know, that sort of thing. And then we still do that for Nathan. Things like checking the grades. I honestly, this year have not been checking up on her, though I have an awareness of what her grades are, and I probably should be a lot more. With my son, who's just starting middle school, I actually find myself way more than he was in elementary school, because elementary school was different.
Right.
With middle school, and of course being distance learning, I feel like I'm like so hyper involved in his school in a way that I never have been before, much less so with my daughter. And it was funny, the question about cleaning their room, I was like, no, I don't really expect them to do it.
I don't either.
No, something that
I wonder if that's just an us thing or like a generational thing. My mom would come in and inspect it. And in my day, I'm like, I don't care. Just close the door if people come over.
I'm curious what other parents have to say about that, because I'm wondering if it is a generational thing, because I just know, and it's the reason that I don't make it a big deal with my kids, because it was such a big deal in my house growing up. My mom was like, clean your room. And it was like, I hated it. And it was one of those things like, oh, I'm a parent now and I'm not gonna make them do it.
Well, yeah, I would love to hear from other people too, because that's a me, but maybe we're just like, I don't know, not good. Anyone? I really want to, now I'm like super curious. Like, do you guys make your kids clean your room? Carla does. Yeah.
Yes, my daughter cleans her room. We don't clean it for her.
Okay. And are you in there like, did you do a good job, or you let it, like, how does that work?
No, because she has to live in it. So if you want to live in filth and stuff, then she does a pretty good job, because we keep the house clean, so she knows what we expect.
Yes. No, that's fantastic. It's funny how, and then I wonder like how much of it is just like their personality. Like I have two kids that are like super clean the room more than I ever did. And then I have one who rooms with one of the clean ones that literally will just throw things everywhere. I just saw something pop up in the chat.
Yvonne, it sounds like it's just us.
I think it is. Are you sure she been teaching this?
Especially my son tends to spread out all over the house. And so if he's an 11-year-old boy. So we have I cannot emphasize enough to all of you how many Legos are in our house. It is insane. And so when they spread out too much, I'm like, no, Nathan, like this has to be in your room. Like you have to keep this in your space and not in the, whole family space.
Right, right. Virginia says, I stopped micromanaging because it was causing me more stress. I had to learn to let go. I blame myself for my mom's blood pressure when I was younger, because that was my mom. Like she would come in and like, you didn't clean it. Like it must have been so stressful for her to be on me like that all the time. And maybe that's why I've made the choice for myself of like, we always talk about, Jenny and I always talk about like picking our battles, like which is a battle that I want to pick. And my mom was also the kind of person where she would yell and I wouldn't do it because I knew that she would get frustrated enough that she would do it for me. Right. So I had learned to like manipulate that situation. But knowing that like all of our kids are different, no matter what we do, it's crazy how for those of us who have multiple kids, our parenting style is typically pretty consistent throughout the house, but how our kids respond to that and how they turn out is just like dice, right? So I honestly, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. I mean, I ask these questions because I really want people to just be aware of, how they do it. And then like later on when things change, like what was my influence in that or how they handled that? Oh no, Carla said I had to skip a dance in high school because my closet wasn't clean and she's still mad. I hope you get a chance to go to a dance, but it probably won't be this year. Carla.
I'm gonna be completely honest about those dances.
You probably didn't miss much. So I think, there's so many skills, and we'll kind of get into that of like the things that are so important for kids to know when they leave. And it's funny because I felt like I have so much time to prepare my kid to go to college. And now that it's going to happen, I'm like, well, we're going to have to see what happens. Cause I don't think that, I don't know how it's going to go.
Yvonne, I want to say, because my daughter, who is 17 and she's a senior in high school, and she's honestly fairly independent and always has been. And it's been pretty good about, like we talk about cleaning the rooms. Like she's actually one of those kids that is fairly clean. Like her room is always pretty clean. Like it's never something I've ever had to worry about with her. She does her own laundry, and she's like, we didn't even have to tell her. She just started doing her own laundry, mostly because she didn't like our schedule for doing the laundry. And she was like, no, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
She's not a great cook, but she could feed herself. She's not going to die. But last night we were having this conversation over dinner, and she's like, I don't understand what the difference is between a debit and a credit card and like banking. And she's like, why would I need a credit card? Can't I always just use cash? And, like all this stuff. Like, so we're having these conversations about why you would want to have a credit and the whole idea of like a credit score and, building a financial history and that sort of thing. And I was like, oh, wow, like honestly, I don't know if it would have occurred to me just to be like, hey, this is stuff you need to know. She was asking. And so we were talking about it, but I was like, oh, this was nuts. This is not something that I had like thought about, like, oh, I need to make sure that she knows this.
There's so many of those things, right? Like when I graduated from high school, the first thing that when I opened my bank account is they offered me a credit card. And what I didn't know or understand is the ramifications with not paying your credit card. And my very first credit card, I actually saved a little paper that I got because it's like, it sticks with me, had a 33% interest rate. I'm 18 years old. I have a free $1,000, right? Like, what am I going to do with it? And it's funny that you say that about Hannah, because with Ethan, he's asking me those kind of questions, and I'm like, it never even occurred to me. Like, so there's the generations are different, and that they're probably more aware of things like that, but those are the things that they need, right? That actually leads me right into like, there's so many kids that excel in school. I'm talking 4.0s going to like these prestigious universities who literally suck at basic life skills. And I worry because it's like, that's how I feel like that's my job, to prepare my kid for the real world. There's going to be so many things that I didn't prepare him for that he'll have to learn on his own. But what are the things that we can allow our kids to learn? And sometimes that means like watching them fail, which is hard to do. I want to fix everything for them. Excuse me. And how can I like support that? And then also acknowledging that like, hey, all of our kids are different. Some of our kids are going to need more nudging than others. Some of our kids are going to need a more hands-off approach, and really just knowing what works in your family and not trying the same thing over and over again. If it doesn't work, making sure that you're switching your strategies, because I'm not going to sit here and say like, don't tell your kid what to do, because some of our kids really, really need that. So just know that this isn't like this is how it works for all kids, because I don't know if it worked, if my strategies work yet, because my kid's not gone yet. So just knowing like, what he's capable. I don't know. Like, I'm kind of scared. I have a comment here. It says, since I have 4 boys, my goal is to raise good husbands. I think that if they do everything for them, then they will look for a wife to take on my role as a woman. And I don't find that fair. I love that. I have 3 boys. I love that. And I wouldn't wish wish them as husbands on anyone right now. Now that you say that, it actually kind of stressed me out of like, I'm raising husbands. Nobody's oh my gosh. I think that's a fantastic strategy of making sure that they're not finding new moms, right? Or to do things for. Like, I'd be horrified if my son starts dating and they're like, giving him snacks in his room and heating up his Hot Pocket. Like, I mean, there's sometimes that's being nice, but I like that, Virginia, that thought of like, have you ever thought about your son, Ginny, being a husband? Like, what would that look like right now?
No.
Well, now we have a goal, right? Like, okay, I love that. That's my new goal of raising husbands.
It's probably sharing too much about our family, but my daughter is gay and came out this year, and well, she had come out to me years ago, but like more to our larger family. And my son is like, I'm asexual and aromantic, and I will never be married or have a partner. And so
Thank God.
he's forging his own path. So,
oh gosh, Virginia, now I got a lot to think about today. Thanks. So this is just like a little list of like what to do, right? Like, this is not easy. This is not really even like a manual, because for some of us it's going to work and for some of us it's not. And the number one way it says to like, get your kids prepared to be independent and be more self-sufficient. The first one makes me laugh. It says, get out of the way. Sometimes we're our own worst enemies when we're encouraging our kids to be self-sufficient. Like, let them master tasks, let them fail. Man, the worst one is when kids fail a class. Oh, heartbreaking. But I have parents who have put more time and energy into that specific class than their kid. And my rule of thumb, whether it's in counseling or parenting, is like, I cannot allow myself to work harder than my kid or than my client. They have to meet me halfway. And sometimes they're not ready to do that, but I can't invest all of my energy in carrying them through these situations, because they're going to have natural consequences and it's going to be hard to watch and they're going to be heartbroken. So I like to think of it as like giving them the opportunity to fail while I'm still there to catch them. Because if they fail for the first times when they're out on their own, that worries me. If they fail at their first job or they fail in their first relationships, like, I worry. And so just giving them the space now to fail, and learning when to get out of the way and when to step in. Like, for example, my oldest, what's horrifying is that he has like 9 tardies to one of his classes. And of course, his teacher is my coworker, which makes it more embarrassing, right? And so in the beginning, I let it go. But then as the, attendance issues started to get worse and worse, I had to figure out, okay, I have to step in now. And it's like, when do we step in? When is the right time? How far do we let it go? When do we just like take that hands-off approach? And when do we step in? And I think that's always a personal choice. Like, for me, it was more like self-preservation of like, I'm going to be embarrassed if the teacher has to call me. Like, that was more about me, I think, and less about him. But at what point should I be allowing him to miss class, or, as a senior and, going on his last semester of high school, at what point do I let him flunk? Because I know this specific teacher, attendance is huge in this class and she will flunk him. So do I step in? Do I let it go? So, knowing when to get out of the way and then knowing when you have to stay in the game. The next one is don't be afraid of failure. It is so hard to watch your kid fail. One of my most heartbreaking experiences in his high school experience was him not making the basketball team. It hurt me. Like I don't want him to fail. But again, knowing that right now in life, I am there to support him when he does. But nothing really ingrains that self-sufficiency like failing. Knowing that personally he'll have to do better next time or work harder. Like the following year he ended up making the baseball team, but he knew he had to put more work in because he knew that he could get cut like he did in basketball. And that was a good lesson for him, that things don't come easy. Sometimes you have to work hard. He's the kind of kid that doesn't have to study a lot. He just kind of goes through the motions and, gets good grades, but knowing that he has to put effort into something that was a big lesson. And so for me, like allowing him, it sounds like it's something to say, Jeannie.
I'm remembering back this past year with my daughter, and I think I've shared with parents before, well, before the pandemic, when we were having high school athletics, my daughter is a wrestler. Wrestler. And last year, she, we don't live we live up on the peninsula, so it's the PAL, it's not the BVAL, we're the PAL. But she was the PAL champion for her weight class. And then we went to CCS and horrible timing. She got very, very sick. This is right like when COVID was really breaking out. And honestly, to this day, I'm like, did she have COVID? Because that girl was so sick. But there wasn't a rampant like COVID throughout CCS, so I guess not. But because she was wrestling girls, it's so sick. But she didn't place in CCS. Like her whole goal last year was to make it to state, and like she failed. Like she did not achieve this goal, and it was heartbreaking. And it honestly put her in this downward spiral that just like we're still recovering from. But it, sometimes like their failures are so difficult, and it's not just like, oh, they failed the test. It's like so huge. Yeah. And yeah, but they have to, like, in the long run, I know that she's going to be better off for this. And I think that's, our role as parents with this, we've got the life experience to know that it's like, it's going to be okay. Her, at the time, 16-year-old brain, this was the end of the world. But, and of course, teenagers, they never want to listen to us. So that's always like the hard part about this with raising independent teenagers, because we, as the parents, do have the life experience, but then our kids don't actually want to listen to our life experience. So you gotta walk
tell parents that all the time. I'm like, if there's something you want to tell your kid, let me know. Because for some reason, there's like this filter that doesn't allow parent insight to go in their brains. I don't know what it is. It could be any other adult and they'll listen, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard to watch. And I think that's the only way that we can encourage them to problem solve, right? Like they know for the next time, like, hey, I got to do A and B to get through. And if I solve all of his problems, he's not going to have that skill, and that's number 3 is encouraging problem solving in our kids. And that really means that we have to watch them fail because sometimes they don't know how to solve it. The next one is a hard one, and I tend to be tough on my kids, and sometimes I forget that I just need to let them experience life. And this one is gently encouraging and avoiding criticism. And one of the strategies that I use in communication in my house, and I know I've said this before in these, is asking my husband or asking my kids when they're telling me something if they want me to listen, give advice, or join them in being mad. And my husband does this to me now because I'll be ranting and raving and he'll be like, do you want me to listen? Do you want me to give you advice? Or do you want me to be mad? And I'm like, just be mad with me, and I think it gives them, it sounds so cheesy, like when you ask somebody that, but it really it minimizes the confusion when it comes to what we need, right? Like if it teaches your kid to advocate for themselves of like, mom, I just need you to listen. The more we listen, the more they talk. And we're such fixers, right? We don't want bad things to happen to our kids. So our intuition is like, fix, 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 tell them, tell them, tell them. But then again, we've got those like earmuffs on that where they can't hear anything that we're saying and it doesn't work. And so it sounds like a cheesy way to do it, but I think it's a good way to establish communication patterns in your house. You know, do you want me to listen? Do you want me to give advice, or do you want me to be mad? And see what happens, you know, for them to think that, oh my gosh, she actually wants to listen and not just tell me, tell me, tell me. It gives us more opportunity in the future to be able to provide advice because they know that you care about what they think, care about their opinions, and want what's best for them. And it's something simple, but it's definitely something where it gives us the opportunity to practice avoiding criticizing. We know the answers because we've already been through it. There were things that I did that my mom told me not to that I had to experience for myself. And just knowing as a parent, like sometimes you've got to let them experience it, right? Like you've got to, because my mom used to be like, don't date in high school. It's going to be all your time and blah, blah, blah. And it didn't matter what she said. I was going to do it. And now I'm like, why did I date in high school? What a waste of time, right? And that was just experience that I had to learn. So learning how to gently encourage and not criticize. The next one for raising a self-sufficient teen is letting go of perfection. And this is something that I'm really practicing with the students that I'm working with right now about letting go of perfection and talking about how currently we are living in survival mode and really encouraging students to treat themselves to the way that they would treat people that they love. And we are so good at treating our friends and our family and the people that we care about with gentleness, kindness, grace. And we are so bad about doing that for ourselves. And so I think letting go of perfection is something that is hard because we want our kids to be good at stuff, but knowing that they're not going to be perfect, they're gonna, you know, struggle in ways, and just embracing those imperfections and, you know, not pointing them out. It's like kids are already so hard on themselves that I really want us to practice letting go of perfection for ourselves. Like that facade of like, I have it together and my kids are good. And, you know, sometimes we kind of leave out the bad stuff because it's a reflection of us when our kids fail. But knowing that like, hey, that's part of the program. They have to fail and not be perfect. And that's okay. And if people think it's a reflection of me, that's a reality that I have to accept because I can't change the way that people think, right? And so knowing that we can just take a deep breath, point out the good that our kids have, be there for them, and just not demanding perfection. The last one is about balance. And this is something that is so hard, and it is something that I don't see happening with our students very well, is finding balance. And what I mean by that is, as humans, we're made up of so many different like parts, right? We have like our mind and our bodies and our hearts and our, you know, we have friendships, we have all these things. And what happens is we hyper focus on certain areas that we find more value in, right? Like you'll see kids who are so engrossed in getting into that school, or, you know, having perfect grades, or beating their classmates, or doing better than the cousin that their parents compare them to, or whatever it is. And 80% of their existence for 4 years is about school. And when you fail a class, when that's where your value comes from, it can completely derail you. And this is something that I see all the time. And when I try to help kids find value in other parts of who they are, I get blank stares, right? Like, besides your grades and your performance, what do you have to offer? What are you offering the world? What do you want people to know about you? And I would say I spend a majority of therapy sessions exploring that, because there's no balance. I think I've done the life wheel before. I don't know if you remember that, Ginny. And if you Google teen life wheel, I should have it on here because balance is so important. It basically like breaks up a human into all these different areas: relationships, school, their environment, health, spiritual, fun, all these things. And you basically rate how successful you're feeling in each of those areas. And I wish I could look at it. I don't know if you could find it, Ginny, and share it because it's so important. It's something that is so important. And I think when kids can visualize how complex they are and how it's so much more than school, it helps them establish that balance and value the other parts of them. Because if you're all school and that's it, and you don't have the capacity to like be social or enjoy life, like what's the point, right? And so it's something that
You want me to share my screen?
would be awesome. I feel like you have so many tabs right now.
Everybody makes fun of my tabs. It's just how I organize my life. It's fine. I know what they are. I'll go back to.
So they have these life wheels for adults, and there's some that are more complex than this. But what you do with this is you take a look at every category. And let's say, for instance, I'm going to start with school, right? And the middle, the center of the circle where everything meets would be a 1. And as you go further and further to the outside of the circle, like close to where it says school, that would be a 10. So how do I feel? And there's some explanations on here, but how do I feel about my performance in school and how school is? And then what I have students do is I put a little dot in the number of where they feel that they are, right? So if I feel like, oh, school's like, meh, it's okay, I would put my little dot right in the middle, and that would be like a 5. And so what I have them do is plot all their little dots on each of the categories. And then I have them draw a line to connect all those dots. And what I usually get is this very squiggly line that, maybe they have like their friend category is really high, so the dot's way out towards the end. And then maybe their family, they don't spend much time with, so their dot's really close. So you got this really jaggedy circle. And then what I ask them is I say, I want you to imagine that you are a vehicle, and your vehicle is driving along the road of life on tires that look like the shape of your circle. How bumpy is your ride? And nobody has a perfect circle, but some circles are not even tires that could be drivable. And it just points out to them, like, which of these areas are you totally neglecting in your life? So I encourage you all, when you get a chance, to just find a life wheel. And even for yourself, because, we always go back to like modeling and how we model our lives. And, for me, it's like mine would say, work is good, but my house is not really clean right now. And my friendships are getting neglected, things like that. And so just modeling for kids that there's so many parts of our lives that are important. And so if we only think school's important, then what happens to the rest of our circle? It falls apart, and we're just not, able to be as stable as we want to be. And so just really like encouraging your kids, like, yeah, how many times a day do we go in there and ask them how school is, or if they got their work done?
I'll when I send out the recording of this meeting, I'll attach this also. I just wanted to show you guys. So this is the principal's message page on our website. I actually have it linked here. These are handouts that we've done in the past. And so
Look at you.
life for teenagers. But then I also have we have this one that if you want, this one's a little bit more it's more for adults because it's got career and like significant other. But this is the one for adults if you want to do it for yourself, to your own balance.
Love it. I love the like significant other romance. I'm like, oof. Career, yeah. But it really is like, do we all have balance? Like, what are the things for you personally that take precedence over everything else? For me, it's my work and it's my kids. but what happened to my health, right? What happened to my friendships? What happened to my environment, or how clean my house is? Things like that. It's like they are all equally important, and they all contribute to my mood. They contribute to my successes. They contribute to everything. And so when we're talking about having an independent teenager, it's like we need somebody who is balanced before we send them out on their own. And that's something that I just stress, because it, you know, how many times a year I ask kids what they do for fun and they don't know how to answer that. You know, they don't understand a lot of times what that means to do something just for yourself, just because, you know, not everything is about putting it on your, you know, college applications of all the things that you did. Like, are they really being present in that moment and learning from those activities and enjoying them? Or are they just doing it because they know that it's going to look good on their college stuff? Like, you know, how do we model that of like, you are so important and all the things that you do are important, not just school. So what does that look like when how we question them? Why didn't you turn in that assignment? Why didn't you do this? But I never ask my kid like, hey, how are your friends? Like, how are you doing? What's that game that you're totally into right now? Like what, like all these things that are important to you. I want, you know, to be able to let them know that they are important. Maybe I don't really care about his video game, but I want him to know that that part of his life that he finds fun is also important and valuable, which is hard sometimes because I don't find the value in a lot of the games. You know, I mean, so that's really, that's the main thing, is like making sure that essentially our job is to send our kids out into the world self-sufficient. And where are we lacking right now?
And I think with that, you know, is finding creative ways, you know, that work for your family to give them more responsibility. And it's something that as they get older, you want to increase. So the amount of responsibility and independence you give freshmen in high school is going to be way different than what you're going to give your senior in high school. You know, especially in things like, you know, and I know early on somebody in the chat had put, you know, I have them, you know, contact their teachers first. That is actually a really great thing. And like the checking of school loop and like monitoring. If you have a freshman, you're going to be on them a lot more. And that's smart.
Yep.
Transitioning into high school, they have to figure out high school. But, you know, this, as they get through and get older, like you as a parent should be less involved. They should be doing a lot more of that on their own.
Mhm.
You know, I have a good friend of mine who is a college professor, and I'm always horrified when she tells me that she has parents of her students call her. Like, they're adults. You know, when your kids go on to college, you as the parent should not be calling their professor. And you know,
Or their boss.
parents right now, don't do that. Don't, you know, or their boss them. Don't do that. No. So high school is the time that we're teaching our kids to learn how to deal with this stuff. That if they don't understand something or they think something, you know, that their teacher did something wrong, that they have to address it. Does that mean that you as a parent never get involved? No, that's not what I'm saying. But you have to let them try first.
Mhm. You think about the life lessons you learn. Like, I'm trying to think back of like, when did I learn how important my sleep is? Like, at what point did I learn that, okay, I need to go to bed at this time to feel really good tomorrow? I'm assuming I wasn't in my teens when that happened.
Like it was like a year ago for me.
Oh, I'm still learning, honestly. Like, I know the concepts now, and now I'm practicing them more. But I think it's like, those are things like I'm like harping on my kid, harping, but knowing that like my mom did the same thing and I did not listen or care because I had to have a day where I missed work, or, you know, whatever, or got fired, or I don't know, whatever happened because I messed up. And then I learned that lesson. So it's like it says, stepping back and having them learn those hard lessons that we don't want them to learn, because no matter what we do, they still have to have that experience. And I wish it wasn't the case. I wish I could just tell them all the failures that I've had so that they can avoid them, but it doesn't happen that way. And so I don't know if you guys have any things of like examples of times where you have let your kiddo fail, or maybe you haven't done that yet, but you have an idea in your mind right now of like, what kind of things can I let go right now to let them experience? Obviously, we don't want them to be unsafe and, protecting their safety, but what things could it be time to let go to allow them to have those failures and those experiences and real life lessons? And it's like, man, after that Virginia's comment, was it Virginia about the boys and the husband? I'm like, a lot of work to do when I get home today. So are there things that maybe you want to try this week of like, okay, like I will let them do that. And I think that for me this week is there is no reason why my kids can't feed themselves lunch. I work, they work, my husband works. Why am I in the kitchen and of course I want to do that a lot of times, but I have this feeling of like guilt when I don't. Or I'll go to Costco and I'll buy all kinds of things. And there may be things that you still have to put together. And the kids will wander around and be like, we're so hungry. And I'm like, bread, meat, cheese, like, right? Like, so what kind of things can we do to start that process? And that's a big one for me. I spend a lot of my time cooking and washing dishes and all that stuff. And it's like, I'm not going to be there forever to do that. And I'm kind of doing a disservice of not. And, again, it's okay to be the mom and take care of them and do certain things, but I don't even know that they're able to without burning down my kitchen, to be honest. Like, I don't know. So just, for thought, if anybody has a thought of like, what can I do this week? Can I let them walk to the park? Maybe. Even that one, like I got like a tinge of anxiety in my stomach because our park's a little far. But is that something that could be helpful and it empowers them? When my kid walked back from getting a haircut, he was like, got my haircut, got hair on my own. Like he kind of had a little, pep in his step. And I'm like, holding him back. When he started driving, we're practicing, he'll be like, now he's like, I did that. Like he feels proud of himself. It's like, how many times have I not given him the satisfaction of feeling good about himself because I was like hovering or helicoptering and doing things for him? I don't know. So I don't know. What about you, Jenny? What can you do this week?
Again, it's like my daughter versus my son. I feel like we actually probably, because she does, obviously I make dinner, but she does give herself breakfast and lunch. I do have to wake her up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I could probably not do, but then she would sleep through her classes. So
Oh,
like as part of the, like, yeah, you could do this, but God, I know if I don't do it, then
I know. I mean, eventually there's going to be a time where you can't do it and she'll miss something. I would actually rather it be her class than her job later on. Right? But then it's hard too, right? You're like, you're an educator. So if your kid ends up on the truant list, like that's embarrassing too.
got a SARB letter before in our house. It's on the fridge.
Right. Yeah. So those kind of things, it's like it's kind of an ego thing too, right? Of your kid failing, like, oh, how'd your kid's basketball trials go? Well, yeah, or whatever. Like, it's funny how we attach that to our own worth and value when we do that, rather than thinking of it, it's like, I'm helping my kid. It's like, no, not. So, just keep in mind, like all these things are just thoughts and suggestions. There's no one right way. You are the expert in your kid. And these are just tips that you can connect with that, expertise in your specific kid. And, what's going to work usually and what doesn't. And I would say if you try it a few times and it doesn't, then we know that it doesn't work and you try something different. So it's just some tips about how to maybe go about it. But this is not like I have it all together. My kids are all independent. And now I'm telling you, it's nothing like that. It's like, we're learning this together. This is my first 17-year-old I've ever had. So there's a huge learning curve and I'm doing the best I can. And I think that's what we can expect from ourselves, is not perfection, but just doing the best that we can. And that's it.
Well, and you had mentioned the importance of sleep, and I didn't know if you were doing that on purpose because that is our topic for next week. Did you remember our topic, or were you just randomly?
No, I didn't know that. And it's funny, I was just telling a parent, like, I'm like, I tell kids all the time, there is no therapy, no drug, no psychiatrist that is better medicine than a full night of sleep. Don't care what.
That's our topic for next Thursday. And we actually, I don't know if we purposely planned that for the Thursday before we go on break with the idea that, okay, everybody's going to have 2 weeks of no school, that's actually a great time to reset and get some good sleep patterns ingrained and
Yeah,
make that a habit.
in
So
theory.
hopefully. So. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I very much appreciate you joining us today. And I hope that you have a wonderful week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.